welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about my very favorite book of all time, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. This is one of the books that really started my healing journey and is one of the big reasons that we're all here today. This book inspired me. I saw how much value it was adding to my life and how it was helping me heal from anxiety and depression and panic attacks. And I knew that if it was so helpful to me, that it would be helpful to other people. And that is when I began this account and when I began sharing some of my reads. And the rest is history. So if you've never read this book, I highly recommend it. I constantly call it the closest thing we have to a manual for life. So if you're looking for some answers, the way this book is structured is that, excuse me, let me try that again. The way that this book is structured is that Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, used to write to himself. He would sit down every night or day, we don't really know, and he would write these little notes to himself about how to be a better human being. He'd try and focus or direct his mind towards the things that he valued, the things that he wanted to focus on, the things that would lead to wholeness and healing and growth and being better for his people and his family and his loved ones. And through that process, he created what is now a book. It was never intended to book. Marcus Aurelius would probably be horrified, as I heard Ryan Holiday once say. He'd probably be horrified to learn that we were reading all of his deepest thoughts. But in that, there's so much wisdom, and it's really led us to some incredible insights to read his writings to himself, knowing that at the time, about 2,000 years ago, he was one of the most powerful men in the world at that time. And how inspiring and motivating it is to see that even as he's sitting kind of at the top of the pile, he's looking down and recognizing that the real work that has to happen is inside himself, and that he'll never be a good leader and he'll never reach his full potential if he doesn't shore up the seas that are inside each of us. And so whenever he would sit down to write, whatever part of that day it was, he would sit down, and you can see from his writing, he's trying to redirect his attention back to the things that he thought were important. And that were, those were the four virtues of Stoicism, which are courage, discipline, justice, and wisdom. And so I thought I'd come on here and share some of my favorite quotes, some of the things that have impacted me the most, and see if it could do the same for you. So thank you for joining me, and let's begin. So I'm going to start out with this one here. He says, the beauty of this book is that in each one, like there's hundreds of these little messages to self, right? And in each one, I feel very strongly that there's not just one message, but multiple insights and multiple messages from each one of these little passages. And so when you think that there are hundreds of them and that each one you could dissect to mean to give you numerous different insights, you really see how on a word-for-word basis, this might just be the most beneficial book that has ever existed when it comes to the mental health and self-help book sphere. So let's begin. He says, remember how long you've been putting this off, how many extensions the gods gave you, and you didn't use them. At some point, you have to recognize what world it is that you belong to, what power rules it, and from what source you spring, that there's a limit to the time assigned to you, and if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and will never return. And so anybody who's been kind of stuck in that feeling of, I know I should be doing something different, but I don't know what that is, or maybe I don't have the courage to pursue it, or people tell me it's not sensible. This is what he's reminding himself. Again, this whole book is all about reminders to himself. It was not meant to be a self-help book. He's not trying to share this information with anyone but himself, sitting there as one of the most powerful men in the world at that time. And he is reminding himself, right, that as he says here, remember how long you've been putting this off. And who knows what he's talking about? Maybe writing this the things that would come to be this very book, or maybe some other creative pursuit, or maybe some plan of action that he had, but he was too scared or too unsure of pursuing it. And he writes to himself, remember how long you've been putting this off, how many extensions the gods gave you. And if you think about, it doesn't just have to be success. Think about building good relationships with people. And we all have had those experiences of regrets of I should have done more. I should have, built that connection better. I should have told them I appreciate them more, right? And so this reminder that you have this opportunity to pursue whatever it is that you're passionate about, whether it's something to do or a relationship with somebody else, and that each day that passes is this opportunity given to you by the gods of time or by the universe or by whatever you want to call what is happening here, right? This you've been given this opportunity time and time again. In each day, in each hour, in each minute that passes, you are having this opportunity to pursue the things that you want in life, or to more deeply connect to the things that are important. And every minute that we waste is a minute that we're not getting back, right? He says, if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and will never return. And we know that with each passing minute, with each passing day, those things are very clearly passing us by and we don't get them back, right? We have a finite number. None of us know exactly what that number is, but it's finite. And in the grand scheme of things, it's very, very small, right? And so using it for any purpose other than achieving what we want, and again, not necessarily from a doing standpoint, but we can go internally, right? If I want to achieve some measure of peacefulness, then every moment that I'm not working toward that is a moment that is wasted. And as we talk about constantly on this channel from the book Atomic Habits, what we know from the science of habit building, that those little moments that we take, that extra minute that I spend on a passion or on building a relationship or on developing stillness inside of me, even just tiny little moments of that end up having big results, because the results compound and start to have this snowball effect that is rolling down the hill. And each time we partake in it and each time we work toward it, that we give that little ball a tiny little push, and that momentum of the ball rolling down the hill will eventually exert all the energy on its own, right? And so this, again, this reminder, this time is passing and it's valuable, because we can't zoom out and because we think we have decades to go, we don't measure the importance of each passing moment. And so this was Marcus Aurelius writing to himself and reminding to himself, the gods have given you so many opportunities to do these things that are important to you, and how many of them have you wasted? So remember not to waste them anymore, right? And he continues, concentrate every minute like a Roman on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice, and on freeing yourself from all other distractions. Yes, you can, if you do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life, and stop being aimless. Stop letting your emotions override what your mind tells you. Stop being hypocritical, self-centered, irritable. You see how few things you have to do to live a satisfying and reverent life? If you can manage this, that's all even the gods can ask of you. And when I mentioned a moment ago that you can get so much insight and wisdom from just one of these little passages, let alone the entire book, this is one of those passages that really showcases that, right? Because we could break this down. We could spend this entire stream going through this one little passage, right? Whatever book this is, book number 2, passage number 5, right? We can spend the entire time on it. We're not going to, because I want to show you a few other quotes. But if we wanted to, if you want to pause here and to go through this word by word, right? What is he saying, right? That all that we need to do, right? if we do everything as if it were the last thing we were doing in our life. And so this is one of the key messages from the Stoics, and one of the key teachings is that we have to see ourselves as dead. We have to see our time has already passed, and then to do it again from that perspective, right? Knowing that the end is essentially already here, right? And that we're just catching up to it. And then using that, not to build up a well of fear or anxiety, but to bring appreciation and gratitude for the present moment, and to motivate us to act in that moment to the best of our abilities, whatever that means for each one of us, whether it means doing something, building relationships, being creative, whatever it is that our purpose is, which Viktor Frankl of Man's Search for Meaning says, we discover. Life isn't telling us, life is asking us, what is your purpose? And it's up to each one of us to decide that for ourselves, not to figure it, not to discover it as in wait for the universe to tell us or to bring it to us, but for us to make a conscious decision. This is what I want to make my life about. These are the virtues. These are the ideas that I hold dear, and I want to walk toward them every single day. And so he says, do that as if you know that your time's already passed, because effectively it already is. And he says, how do we do that? We stop being aimless. We stop letting our emotions override what our mind tells us. We stop being so hypocritical, self-centered, and irritable. And if you think of like the things that keep you down on any given day, that's probably a good summary of all the things, right? We're feeling aimless, right? We don't have a purpose. We're letting our emotions override the things that we know we should be doing. For example, hey, I know I should be going for a run. I know I should be going to the gym. I know I should be eating healthy. I know I should be reading more books, right? But our emotions that say that's boring, or it forces me to tap into some feelings that I'm uncomfortable with. Instead, we numb, we escape, we distract. And so he's saying, stop being aimless, right? Stop letting your emotions override what your mind tells you. Stop being hypocritical, right? Saying one thing and doing the opposite. Self-centered and irritable, right? If we look at all the things that prevent us from living a life of presence and joy, those are essentially a fairly good list of a high majority of that would be affected by this in some way. And he even says, you see how few things you have to do to live a satisfying and reverent life. And so by that context, we take it to mean that this is what he thinks, that these are all the things that you need to live a satisfying life, right? What is it? Focus on what's in front of you. Take advantage of each day, right? Stop letting your mind get overrun by emotions. And then, don't be a hypocrite. Don't be someone that other people wouldn't enjoy being around. Don't be self-centered. Don't be moody and irritable, right? Go internally and work on building what the Stoics call the inner citadel, this sort of fortress inside yourself that is impenetrable. No matter what the world puts on me, no matter what other people put on me, I am, because I've made the decision, I'm going to make my focus on not being self-centered, not being irritable, not being hypocritical, right? Those are the things that are within my control. I don't control what the world does out there. I don't control what other people do, but I do control whether I walk toward this life with self-centeredness or not, right? Being a hypocrite or not, being irritable or not. Those things are ultimately within my control. Those are what the Stoics called the internals. Those are the only things, according to the Stoics, that we should be focusing on, because it's the only thing that we can effectively control, right? All that other stuff are externals. We can't do anything about that. I can't change the weather. I can't change whether I get the job or not. I can't change how nice or mean somebody else is to me. But I can control those things. I can control how I go through this life. I can control my perspective, my focus, the energy that I put out in the world. And so those, according to the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius, those are the only things that we should put any time into, is on controlling the internal, so that no matter what the externals do, I stay resolute. I continue moving toward my purpose of healing, of growth, of bettering myself, and then of bettering the lives and the environment of the people around me. And so you could see, that's only a surface kind of exploration of these two little passages. So we could go into it. You could see how deeply you can go and how much value there is in each one of these. And there's an entire book of them, 12 books, the way it's divided in this. 12 books and hundreds of these little passages that all have that much value and insight and worth. And so it's why I consider this the best book ever written, because it's just on a word for word basis. There's just nothing like it that I've ever found. So I want to turn back a little bit because this is one of my favorite passages, even though we can take something away from it, but it's more of the energy I just think is really beautiful. And so this is book number 1, where he's kind of giving props to all the people in his life, right? It's his list of gratitudes. I think it's called debts and lessons, right? So these are all the debts. So I want to point out the difference in language here, which I think is really beautiful. So he says, to my grandfather, what is he indebted to him for? Character and self-control. Notice how, short, quick that is. To my father, integrity and manliness, right? All 4 things very important, no doubt had a big impact on his life. But notice how he, the quick, short, very descriptive version, specifically descriptive, right? Whereas then comes his mother. And what does he say about his mother? Notice how the language is different. Her reverence for the divine, her generosity, her inability not only to do wrong, but even to conceive of doing it, in the simple way she lived, not in the least like the rich. And so ask yourself, if this was my child writing about me or my relative or my friend, which of these would I rather have, right? The character and self-control, integrity and manliness, or the very lyrical language that he uses, right? And so again, these are debts and lessons. So it means I learned from these things. So what did he learn from those things? Her reverence for the divine. Now, we don't know exactly how Marcus Aurelius defined divine, whether it had to do with religion, with gods, or if he's just saying her ability to see the magic, to know that there's something bigger than us going on here, and we have our role to play in it, right? That's how I choose to take this, and it might not be the accurate analysis of what he actually meant. None of us will ever know, but in the spirit of the book and all the rest of the writing in here, it seems to me that would be likely what he'd be referencing, is this ability to look at the magic of life, to recognize that it exists and that it is worthwhile for us to put ourselves kind of squarely in the middle of it, and realizing that we are just part of that process, that there's magic here and I'm involved in that magic and nothing else matters, right? It's my duty to kind of fulfill that magic to the best of my abilities. And this is the book about what does that mean, right? What are the abilities that I have? Which again is summarized very quickly as growth, healing, and being for others. And then he says her generosity, obviously something very important and something that our leaders today, remember he was the Roman emperor, one of the most powerful men in the world. Her, this focus on generosity, how much better would we be as a society if our leaders, if our heads of state were focused on generosity as much as he was, right? Her inability not only to do wrong, but even to conceive of doing it. And finally, the simple way she lived, not in the least like the rich. And this is someone who lived among wealth his entire life. And most of the people he interacted with on a day-to-day basis would be extremely wealthy. And he says, one of the things that I learned and appreciated and respected and indebted to my mother for most is showing me how not to live like those people, which is kind of, throwing some shade at the wealthy and saying, the optimal way to go is to live simply, to not worry about things, to release our attachment to the things, and to not live, quote unquote, like the rich. So I always thought that was really beautiful and kind of warms my heart that he had that kind of relationship and reverence for his mother. So again, when we're talking about like the manual for life, he says, you need to avoid certain things in your train of thought. Everything random everything irrelevant, and certainly everything self-important or malicious. You need to get used to winnowing your thoughts so that if someone says, "What are you thinking about?" you can respond at once and truthfully. The thoughts of an unselfish person, one unconcerned with pleasure and with sensual indulgence generally, with squabbling, with slander and envy, or anything else you'd be ashamed to be caught thinking. And I love this idea of things you'd be ashamed to be caught thinking. And we don't want to obviously use that to instill actual shame, like feeling like I'm not good enough. But instead, what he's pointing to is like, if you wouldn't do it in life, then don't allow your mind to kind of do it internally, right? If you'd feel embarrassed to slander someone or to be very envious, very jealous, then internally when those things come up, recognize that, notice that, and take the steps necessary to alleviate some version of that, or to unload it in some way, or to turn your attention away from it. And once again, so many insights in just one little passage, right? It really gives us insight into what he was thinking. So the things that he wanted to avoid in thought: everything random, everything irrelevant. And this is kind of a big problem, a big issue in our time right now with social media, with constant stimulation, constant distraction, is that we're very rarely focused in a very specific way on the things that we want to accomplish, achieve, the way we want to be in the world, right? Because, not through necessarily any fault of our own, because the world is just wired for that, for distraction, for stimulation, for escape, for endorphin chasing. And so it's infinitely more important now than in his time that we really go internally, build that inner citadel, and make sure that we're not getting distracted by random and irrelevant things. And certainly, of course, self-important or malicious. You need to get used to winnowing your thoughts. So if someone says, "What are you thinking about?" you can respond at once, right? Rather than being like, "Oh, I don't know, nothing really, the new Netflix show," or whatever it is, right? Decide on your purpose, decide on your energy, and then do your best to focus in on that as often and for as long as possible. Obviously, it's not possible in every second of every day, but to have that kind of mentality that that's what I'm working toward, that's what I'm striving for, is to be as resolutely focused on the things that are most important to me as often as I possibly can. I love that. He calls it being an athlete in the greatest of all contests, right? And that's obviously the contest of life. And so this is what he sees as being an athlete of humanity, is doing these things. And then that gives such a good perspective, because what is being an athlete? It's a lot of practice. It's a lot of failure. It's a lot of sacrifice, all in the name of your craft, all in the name of being the best at something. And he's saying, do that same thing with your mentality, with your purpose, with what you do out in the world, right? Focus on those things. Focus on sacrifice and on practice and on repetition, all these things that we value in athletes and that we appreciate when we see them on the big stage, right? All that action comes in the dark, right? It's not, when we watch a great basketball player, we see the results of all that work that we aren't privy to, right? And so it's the same thing with this kind of passage through life, is that we want to put in the work kind of away from the spotlight and focus on the things that will make an impact, which is that practice, repetition, sacrifice, right? Having a singular purpose. So I love that so much. An athlete in the greatest of all contests. I see a lot of negativity going on in the chat here, and I'd like to point out that this is one of the things that he talks about, right? It doesn't matter what you believe, because the history records are actually, if you dive very deeply in it, are we don't have all the information, and it's very clear that we don't really know that much. But the point being that that is an external, right? Who Marcus Aurelius was doesn't impact what goes on inside me. I can always find goodness in everything, regardless of who the person was. Is there something that I can take away from this? Is there something that I can learn from this? Is there a way to make me a better person, not Marcus Aurelius a better person, right? That is what the focus is. As he said before in the passage we just read, don't focus on things that are malicious, or don't focus on things that are random. It's not important what he did, again 2,000 years ago, so our records are laughably inadequate. But regardless of that, the point being is, what can I take away to make my life better and to improve the state of the world? Is there something that I can use in here to do that? The answer is obviously yes. And so we're not looking for a messiah. We're not looking for a guru. We're looking for insights and wisdoms that every single person alive who has ever lived has some of those, right? We're looking for those things that can make a great impact internally, so that we can use whatever version means something to us to put goodness into the world, right? So don't get distracted by the random things. And random is reading a blog about someone who lived 2,000 years ago and discarding all the wisdom based on that very inadequate information, right? Instead, the goal is, what can I take from this to make my life better and the life of the people around me better, right? That's where our focus should be. Right? And if there's parts of a book, any book, this one or any other, that don't resonate, or you don't connect with the author, great. Discard it, move on to the next one, right? We're not looking for a Bible. We're looking for insights and wisdoms that will help us improve. If you do the job in a principled way, with diligence, energy, and patience, if you keep yourself free of distractions and keep the spirit inside you undamaged, as if you might have to give it back at any moment, if you can embrace this without fear or expectation, can find fulfillment in what you're doing now as nature intended, and in superhuman truthfulness, every word, every utterance, then your life will be happy. No one can prevent that. And so once again, we kind of like play this back, or this is how I do it in my own mind. I go kind of work backwards once I've read through it. So he says, then your life will be happy. And so I'm like, okay, so he's just listed all the things he believes will lead us to happiness. So let's review that. What are those things? Do the job in a principled way. I mean, have kind of your honor, your integrity, with diligence, energy, and patience, right? So putting all your effort in, not expecting results, and do it very systematically, like with a very focused intention. Then, if you keep yourself free of distractions, which we've already spoken about, and keep the spirit inside you undamaged. I think this might be the thing in today's day and age that might be the most important part of this entire book, keeping your spirit undamaged. I see it in my comments, in my interactions with people all the time, that there's a bit of this loss of hope, which is completely understandable considering how much people are struggling, the state of the world, inflation, right? But all those things have occurred over the millennium, time and time again. Those are all the externals, right? Marcus Aurelius ruled in the midst of a 15-year pandemic. He had to leave the main cities to try and stay alive, right? His brother was eventually lost his life due to the pandemic, and eventually it took his life as well. So he knows something about this struggle, right? Not everybody's struggle is equal, not everybody's struggle is the same, but this ability to keep your spirit undamaged, to go through the challenges of life and continuously be framing your mindset towards healing, growth, the betterment of yourself, the betterment of humanity. That's the real thing that we're missing, and that so many of us are struggling with, is how do I withstand kind of the slings and arrows of the world while keeping my spirit internally undamaged, right? That is the work of Stoicism. That's why we're here. That's why we read these books. That's why in our book club we work with mental health professionals, because the whole goal is to figure out how do we heal this stuff that has been there since many years, for a lot of us, decades for some people, generally from our childhood and our upbringing. How do we deal with that, excavate that, and then frame our mindset towards healing and growth so that no matter what the world decides is our fair share of suffering, that we can handle it to the best of our abilities and continue moving forward with an undamaged spirit. I really think that's one of the key things that we need to focus on as humanity here right now, keeping our spirits undamaged. Absolutely, we can be friends, Amanda. And then, so all that stuff I just said about keeping our spirits undamaged. How do we do that, or in what way do we do that? He says, nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul, especially if you have other things to rely on. An instant's recollection, and there it is, complete tranquility. And by tranquility, I mean a kind of harmony. Stop getting away from it all like that. Renew yourself, but keep it brief and basic. A quick visit should be enough to ward off all, and then we don't have the translation of what that meant or didn't survive the initial writing, and send you back ready to face what awaits you. And this is kind of the work of the inner citadel, of figuring out how do I build this place inside myself that I can return to time and time again. Whether that's a feeling, a memory, right, a song, being out in nature, well, maybe not being out in nature because that's more of an external, but he's saying that, or at least the memory of it, right? The memory of the last time you were in nature, of your favorite spot, your favorite hiking spot, or that sunset you saw. He says sometimes we can use those memories to well up that feeling of motivation, of inspiration, of being okay with the world, whatever it is, right? Remember the smell of cherry blossoms. That's one of my big ones. Whatever it takes, go inside and find a place where you can reach that kind of tranquility, that it's inside you, that all of us have it, and that nowhere you can go, right? There's no vacation you can take that is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. We don't need anything external. And I talk about it all the time, that TikTok trend that happened a while ago, where it was like, I thought I needed a vacation, and then it cuts to that person on a vacation, and it says, but what I really needed was therapy. And I thought that was such a funny trend because it's so true. We often think if I just change the outside, if I can just, get away from it all, then everything will be different. People switch jobs, switch partners, switch where they live, all in the name of trying to find some kind of measure of peacefulness. It's not to say we can't do that and we shouldn't strive and we shouldn't try to improve. Obviously we should. But that the reality is that if you believe this stuff, and teachers like Michael Singer, like Eckhart Tolle, that path to freedom is an internal journey, that no matter where we are, no matter what happens, if Viktor Frankl can do it in Nazi Germany, then we can do it in whatever situation our life is, right? To frame ourselves toward goodness, towards healing, towards growth, no matter what the external circumstances are, right? And that we can do that internally. We don't need any external help in order to reach that. And if you read, maybe my second favorite book of all time, or definitely top 5, The Untethered Soul, he talks about that infinitely, that we have this this reserve of goodness, of energy, chi, flow, whatever you want to call it, and it lives inside us all the time, right? It doesn't go anywhere, and we can't lose it. We can't get rid of it. It doesn't get broken. People say, I'm broken. I would say, you're not broken. There's just stuff on top that's making you feel that way. But he talks about this idea that all we need to do is to remove those blockages that are inside us, that have been trapped in there for most of us through our upbringing and childhood. Now, once we remove those blockages, which is the work of healing, once we remove those blockages, we won't need to do anything else to feel this goodness and tranquility, because that is our natural state. That river, that flow, that chi inside us is always there. We just have to tap into it, allow the rest to kind of come to the surface, and then be excavated out, and then we have this infinite well of goodness inside us. me see what else we got here. Here we go. Everywhere, at each moment, you have the option to accept this event with humility, to treat this person as he should be treated, to approach this thought with care so that nothing irrational creeps in. Once again, just one tiny passage of this book with hundreds of them, and there's so much there, and there's so much value. If we could instill just this one passage into ourselves, how much easier, happier, better, more joyful, more tranquil would we be, right? If in each moment we could accept the event with humility, meaning, whatever happens to us, whatever externals are happening in that moment, to accept it as this is the nature of things. This is what was meant to be in this moment, and I can accept it without resistance and without anger and just, as he says, with humility, right? And to treat this person as he should be treated, and to approach this thought with care, meaning that anything that goes on internally, and this is the work of mindfulness of Michael Singer, Eckhart Tolle, so many people like them, right? This is the work of mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn, that every thought that comes into us, we should be observing, we should be noticing, and we should be optimizing, right? Is this thought pattern serving me? When I've this is the example I always give. When I think back to something that happened 15 years ago that was really embarrassing for me, that doesn't exist in anybody else's memory anymore but my own, right? When I'm going into it for the 10,000th time, is there a purpose? Is there value? What is the use of this, right? And this is something that I ask myself often now internally. What is the value of this thought pattern? And what we find very often when we start kind of this mindfulness journey is that such a high percentage of our daily thoughts and emotions are just this repeating cycle that is often, for some strange reason, seems to be designed to keep us feeling stuck and down and scared, right? And unhappy and unfulfilled and unjoyful. And so this awareness that okay, this is how the mind works for whatever reason. So it's my responsibility to approach this thought with care, right? To look, to reflect, to think about what is the purpose of this? How is it serving me? Do I actually want this to be in my mind, right? And so if you read a lot of Michael Singer's book, you know that eventually he makes the point that we want to befriend this kind of dark part of us. But I found in my journey that it was very helpful at a certain point, which I started doing after reading this book, after reading Meditations, that for a little while at least, it helps to kind of see your mind as somewhat adversarial, right? That it's doing its thing that are not always good for me. It often does things that I don't find helpful to my human experience, right? Like that memory of the embarrassing thing, or telling me I can't do something, or that it's never going to work out, or that the world is a dangerous place, or that I'm unlovable, right? All these different things that our minds do and say to us, right? Reflecting on that and recognizing that it's often not helpful to our human experience. Right. And so having that awareness and then seeing that as sort of, I don't want to use the word enemy because that's such a negative, obviously a very aggressively negative connotation, but as someone who is doing something that I don't like, and it's my job to kind of fix that, to rectify that situation in whatever way I need. The optimal is to go in, to kind of hug that part of you, to bring it into the light, to make it recognize that everything's going to be okay. It doesn't have to be scared anymore, right? This is the work of one of my favorite books that we just read recently in our book club, No Bad Parts. This is the work of IFS, to go into those parts of us who are suffering and to kind of bring them into the light, to make them, to recognize, hey, they're trying to serve some kind of purpose. There's some reason why my subconscious is doing this. Let me first reflect on what that could be, and then to kind of reparent that part of myself and to say, hey, it's okay. I understand that you're scared because you never had somebody taking care of you. But now here I am. I'm the adult. I'm the one who's kind of evolved and awake, and I'll take care of it. You no longer have to use this fear or negativity or any of those negative emotions to drive my human experience forward. I will do that on my own. And I promise you that in those moments where what you're saying is actually important to what's going on, I'm going to take that in. I'm going to listen. I'm going to make any adjustments necessary, right? I'm not going to lock you up in a cage. I'm just going to decide that from now on, I'm the one holding the wheel. You can sit in the passenger side and you can tell me all you need to tell me, but ultimately it's me who's in control. And I want you to know that I'm going to be looking out for your best interest and that you can trust me, right? That that's an example of a type of session that you want to do internally with your parts. And, if parts is a little convoluted, just think of it as all your little inner children. Under IFS, we don't just have one inner child, we have many inner children at different stages of our development. And that by going in and having actual real conversations, like I just modeled, that we can help those parts of us kind of release the trauma and wounding and pain that they've been holding on to and expressing to us in a way that we think, oh, that's just me, that's just my voice. But it's not. It's the voice of domestication. It's the voice of our experiences, our upbringing, the lessons that we've taken on from other people, right? Or just the side effects of the traumas and pains that we've gone through. And so it's our job as the self-aware and awake human being to go into those parts, to parent them the way we would our own children, and to try and collectively frame our mind towards the stuff that we talk about with the Stoics. Yeah, this live will be on YouTube later on. So you could just go follow the YouTube and all of it will be there. I love this. It's so deep and really one of those, there's lots in this book, but one of those passages that when I read it, I had to sit back in my chair and kind of exhale slowly and look up at the skies and really take it in. Because he says, with food and drink and magic spells, seeking some novel way to frustrate death. And for me, and this again might not be how he meant it, but we are all free to interpret it as we want. This passage pointed to this idea that we talk about constantly of numbing and escaping and trying to ignore the difficult parts of us because we feel like we're not strong enough to deal with them, right? So we do it through food and drink and distraction, right? The novel way to frustrate death, meaning to kind of ignore the reality that our time is fleeting. And if you read books like Staring at the Sun by Irvin Yalom, he says that we all, every single one of us, whether it's conscious or subconscious, every single one of us has this ingrained fear of death. And that so much of our day-to-day actions, so many of our day-to-day actions are really to soothe that existential dread and anxiety that many of us don't even recognize that we have. And it's why the Stoics talked about death endlessly, because they saw it a different way. They said, don't be anxious about it. Use it as a motivator to come back into the present, to appreciate what you have, to recognize the amazing opportunity you have to be a human, right? The greatest long shot of all long shots, to be a human on a rock flying through space, right? And then when you frame it that way, all the little stuff that we worry about on the day-to-day starts to come into perspective. And we start to realize there's no need to run. There's no need to escape. Let me try and understand instead, what is the message this anxiety is trying to drive, which often in my experience, I found it's trying to drive this awareness of the present moment, this presence, this come back here and enjoy what is here, right? Don't live in the past. It is a bottomless pit, as Eckhart Tolle calls it. Don't live in the future because you have no idea which future is going to play out. Come back here. Bring presence, bring appreciation, bring gratitude. Stop trying to escape death and let it motivate and inspire you to be the best version of you that you can be and to lead the life that your whole self, your higher self, actually wants to live.